Listeners and watchers, welcome back to the next episode of the podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by my friend Walter. Walter, how the heck are you?
Oh, I'm good. We've got a nice autumn day. These are my favorite. This is my favorite time of the year. The dog will come and get me later and make me go for a walk, which is for my own good. So
Yeah, we took our dogs out this morning. It's very nice here as well for a change, so I'm enjoying that. Walter, where are you joining me from today, by the way?
I'm in northern Wisconsin, so not so far from the border to Canada. Sometimes
Mm.
people hear that in my accent a little bit, and it's a
Yeah,
it's a nice place to live. We're getting ready for the winter.
nice, nice. I'm actually wearing a Canada cap today, so that was fitting, I suppose. Loose
Perfect.
connection there. Yeah, Walter, it's really cool to have you on. Obviously, we've been speaking on Substack for a while now, on and off in different ways, and you've very kindly read some of my books and things like that, which is brilliant. We're going to talk a little bit about fantasy books today and what it means to write fantasy and read fantasy and enjoy fantasy in general, which I think is always interesting as a fantasy reader and writer myself. It's cool to talk to you about that. Before we dive into that, Walter, can you just quickly introduce yourself for our readers? They might know who you are already, but if they don't, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. Write. I'd rather be writing on Substack. I've been doing that pretty solidly. I guess it's 2.5 years now there. Before that, and still to this day, I write on Medium, and I'm a Boost nominator over on Medium. I've been a full-time writer for about 5 years. Prior to that, I did all the things all writers do, where I did some teaching and I did some editing, and I owned my own business for a while. But writing, has been the consistent thread through my whole life. I spent 10 years in South America too, and that's where I met my beautiful wife. So
Hmm.
that's pretty much the story. That brings us up to the present.
Nice, perfect, perfect. Yeah, and it's great to have you on Substack because I know you were on Medium first, and you're still on Medium as a nominator. Can you quickly tell us a little bit about Medium right now? Because again, people here on Substack might have been a Medium before, they might not have been. Is it a good time to join at the minute? Should they stay on Substack? What's the sort of the pros and cons, would you say, of maybe using both platforms at the same time?
Yeah, I think in my experience as a writer, you're just always looking for new platforms. And one of the real advantages of Medium, I mean, they've been going through some transitions now, and it's up and down. You'll see a lot of people kind of complain about it. I mean, my earnings for this month are going to be lower than the previous month, but I had like a pretty high month 2 months ago, and it's just writing is just never consistent. I mean, we're not in this business for like a consistent paycheck anyway. One of the great things about Medium is their boost program. It is more difficult these days to get a story accepted to boost, but that gives you an advantage in Medium's algorithm. So what that is attractive for is writers who are just kind of starting off and they haven't necessarily developed a big following. Because
Mm,
Substack, if you're starting on Substack and you got 30 subscribers, which is still great, that's a room full of people.
mm,
But you're not going to get all that many views on that. Whereas if you take that same story and just put it on Medium too, if you get a boost, then you're potentially going to be seen by thousands of people. It helps you grow on both platforms. So, if it kind of goes back and forth what makes sense for people. Um, I
mm,
think the base yearly subscription for Medium, because everything is behind a paywall over on Medium. But I look at it as I think you pay $60 a year. So I look at it as just subscribing to a newsletter with, millions of followers that could potentially get you some views
mm.
as you're building your Substack. I think that makes sense. And so I mainly use those two platforms, but I always have my eyes out for other opportunities, just as I've always done as a writer throughout the years. Things change fast. So, all it takes is somebody to come in and buy a platform and change it, and then you're starting from zero. So you just have to, I think, be open-minded, see how it works for you. And the things that work for me won't necessarily work for other writers. That's another thing I like to tell people too. So yeah, just experiment with it, see how it works.
Nice. What does your like overall ecosystem look like? Is it just Medium and Substack, or do you use anything else in terms of promotion?
Well, I've used Kofi a little bit. I'm on Blue Sky,
Hmm.
a couple other just kind of social media things, but the these days the majority of my time is on Substack. And the other thing that's great about both Substack and Medium is you retain ownership of your content, so you can publish them elsewhere.
Hmm.
I've spent a lot of years, just on looking for various paying markets that'll just pay you $200 for an article or whatever. And that's another great supplement for a writer to help supplement your income. But you got to be careful in some of those cases because sometimes you'll sign a contract that give them exclusive rights, so then you're not able to pay. So just always be mindful about the things you're signing. If it's great to get a paycheck, but then you don't want to get, yourself into some legal issues after that. So I mean, the flexibility of Medium and Substack are great. And I started with Medium because I would always submit my stories to various markets, and then if it's not taken, you submit it somewhere else. And once I'd submitted to like three or four things, I'm like, okay, I'll just put it on Medium and earn some money there. And then for a while, I was making, you could make as much as $2,000 or $3,000 per article on Medium, so that was better than the other places I was submitting to. So my focus went to straight to Medium. And then earnings kind of dropped off a little bit on Medium, so I started building up a Substack. But it's just like, so now on Substack you'll post an article and maybe it'll generate 3 new paid subscribers, which is kind of the different thing. But
Mm.
if you make a little bit on it on Medium too, then that's you know, it all helps to keep
Yeah.
a writer afloat.
Yeah. I like to have like different income streams working together simultaneously. I think it's better than sort of putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping for the best. Because if it doesn't work out or the platform changes, as you say, yeah, can
Yes. And
scupper
I've
you.
even started up. I've like signed up a account for Patreon just so I've kind of got something built there. And if you should periodically download your email list so you can. And I've warned my readers too. I'm just like, could be I'm going to have to just jump off this platform. If that happens, you'll get
Mm.
an email from me from one of these other places, and then we'll keep going. So it's just you have to be mindful of those things.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why email's so powerful and so effective because you just kind of migrate it somewhere else anytime you need to if a platform does go belly up or something like that. What does your process look like, Walter, in terms of writing? So if you want to write an article on Medium or Substack or whatever, just talk us through what that looks like for you in terms of the ideation aspect and then what the process of actually writing looks like.
Yeah, and these days I've got just so many things I have to write about. And I think capturing your inspiration is probably the most important skill, that writers have to learn. Because otherwise, if you get into those moments where just before you go to bed, you're like, oh, this is a great idea. I'll remember it in the morning. And then if you don't remember it, which is probably likely, then you inflate the idea and it becomes like the most brilliant thing. And you spend the whole day fretting over the fact that you lost this idea. Whereas if you just wrote it down and you're like, well, that's not all that good, and that's really the difference. But
Yeah.
but these days I spend a lot of time with my voice recorder. I find it's just a lot faster. In the past, I've done things, I've handwritten notes, but my writing is illegible. It's just awful. So that's a
Same
waste of
here.
time. And then I'll spend time typing emails to myself, but I hate those little cell phone keyboards. I mean, I was one of the last people to have a BlackBerry because you could actually be pretty fast with a BlackBerry, but finally peer pressure got to me. But these days, instead of doing that, because if you start feeling the flow state coming on, it's really critical to just grab that and be in that for 5 minutes, and
Mm,
and I think the more I've become a professional writer, it shows, or you develop the skill to stay in the flow state for longer periods of time. Where I think it's sort of like meditation. When you're first meditating, it's like maybe you can handle this for a minute, whereas somebody's been doing it for 50 years can sit there in a meditative state for hours.
mm,
And I think that's really similar with writing. And but when the flow state comes on, typing really isn't efficient enough. So I'll just do a voice note. And
mm.
there's all these AI transcribers, that take your text and break it up into paragraphs. And
Yeah.
then I'll write the article from the voice note, the AI generated transcript. It won't be at all the same, but what I've done is captured the entire outline of inspiration. And from there, I'm able to write a good article. So I've got so many voice notes that I have to go through to this day that I'll never run out of things to write about.
I love that. Where are you generally when you find inspiration hits you the most? Are you out for a walk or just doing your chores or where does it reach you?
Yeah, that's one of the things too, where it's just sort of like whenever it happens, it is really good to go out for a walk. I think your body just needs to push away from a computer screen. I think that wears your eyes out.
Mm,
And there's just something about going out for a walk where at first you're all agitated and then you're maybe, 5 or 10 minutes in and you just kind of feel yourself start to relax. And if you can get out to nature, that works for me where the leaves start going by. And that just
mm,
sort of like it just drops it's just such a wonderful feeling. And I'll feel something come on and I'll just like work through it. It's like it'll be like a 6 to 8 minute voice note generally. I did one yesterday. It was like 20 minutes though. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. But I'll sometimes I'll do like three of them. And then it's like once the idea is out of you, then you can kind of relax and enjoy your walk again. I'll listen to audiobooks too. I switch back and forth between audiobooks. But sometimes I'll drop off my kids from school and I'll just have been talking to my kids and I just like on the way home I'll record a voice note because it'll have made me think of something. So just whenever that inspiration comes, I like just don't even question it. I guess I can't answer where the inspiration comes from, but I think everybody does get that.
Mm.
I think they just don't harvest it, you know? It's like leaves fall, like they just let them fall where I'm like running around with my basket catching every leaf. And I
Yeah.
think that's the only difference between writers and, you know, people who aspire to be writers.
Yeah, yeah. The worst thing is if you're in like a really inconvenient place and it happens and you can't record a note or you can't write something down, you're trying to hold on to it in your brain as long as you can until you get to a better location. Um,
Absolutely.
just you're talking about going outside for walks and things like that. Like that's been I would say it's been a major influence and inspiration location for me in terms of fantasy. I'm going to segue into this now because we want to talk about fantasy a little bit. My debut novel, Soulborn Talisman, is very much inspired by like Irish landscape and Northern Ireland in particular, where I'm from. And a lot of that came originally just from being in the mountains and just being out for walks and the fresh air and the shape of the mountains, especially the peaks, which made me think of castles and things like that. And being in the forests and things like that. And there's definitely parts of my first novel that were just ripped directly from places I've walked before, that I've just had in my brain whenever I've been writing those scenes. Um, do you find, Walter, that nature in particular is there's a real like connection there with fantasy novels in general? Is that like is there like a bridge between what we see when we're outdoors versus when we're sitting in a room in front of a computer, and fantasy?
Yeah, without question it is. You know, and we were talking before, I mean, we got the autumn leaves here where I'm at in Wisconsin. It's just so beautiful to go out there and how could you not be inspired by that? And you know, I there's there's this couple places where I go where there's this murder of crows. It sounds weird to use the actual correct word for it, but the murder of crows. And if you just sit and watch crows for a minute, they're so clearly smart. And then they do weird things like they pick up shiny objects and they put them in their nests. And they got like so something about that. It's just it's hard to not be captivated by that. And then once you
Mm,
start learning about like the folk tales of your area and around here it'd be,
mm,
you know, the Native American folk tales with the trickster, you know, which is and it's similar to like the leprechauns, you know, it's the same sort of idea. And I'm sure there's I want to hear all about the other wonderful folk tales from your neck of the wood because they're just they always just fascinate me and you can but you can tell how those just come up naturally from walking through the woods. You're explaining things like weird things happen in the woods that are kind of the trickster narratives. You almost hear laughter sometimes, and it's hard not to look at a crow and think that they're just spying on everybody and paying attention because that's the way they look. You know, they're
yeah.
just so magnificent. And then my neighbor, he's got a dog that's part wolf. And
Wow.
that thing is so smart. I mean, you look at this dog, you look at it in the eyes, and it's like it's going to talk to you. And the wolf will see me. Like I'll be driving, I'll see him, her. I'll be driving down the road and I'll see her a half mile away, and she's already noticed me in my car, and it's like she's like looking right at me as I drive up because she recognizes me and she knows my dog. So just stuff like that. It's like, how do
Mm.
you not believe in the magic, you know, of our world when you have all that stuff surrounding you? It's a daily source of inspiration.
Yeah, no, I'm actually just I'm digging back through some stuff here just as you're saying that, because I was remembering something that I read somewhere. But, yeah, no, yeah, it's the same here, and like I've brought in elements of Irish mythology into my fantasy novels as well because there's so much. Like you mentioned leprechauns, but there's just so much going on in Irish mythology, which I'm fascinated by. Like I love it. I love where those stories come from and, like how people even now, maybe not particularly my generation, but certainly the generation before us, would still hold to a lot of those tales and those stories and those superstitions as well. Like for instance, in our little small garden, there's a hawthorn tree at the back, which is considered a fairy tree here in Ireland, and you're not supposed to cut down a fairy tree. If you drove down the road and you passed a field and there's a single tree sitting in the middle of it, it's because the farmers are afraid to cut it down in case the fairies get annoyed and then they come and like trick them. And we have one at the bottom of our garden. So I love all that kind of stuff. Like that was a major inspiration for me whenever I was writing fantasy. And again, even you mentioned some of the folklore in your sort of neck of the woods as well. And like I'm writing a horror novel now, which is set in Canada. And I've drawn elements of like Canadian and probably just North American in general, mythology into that a little bit too. And again, it's fascinating and quite scary a lot of the time too. Like, have you got like a favorite bit of lore from your sort of region that you can think of?
Oh, from around here. Well, let me just kind of go into what you're saying though, like the cultural overlap is what I
Mm,
started to think about. I mean, you got your trolls in Norway, I remember thinking about that, and then my wife was from South America, and they've
mm,
got a whole kind of different look at it. I mean, they have their legend of like these gnomes that'll steal babies and things like that. So all that stuff kind of overlaps. I mean, I really do like the trickster narratives.
mm,
Um, it, they can be, there's always a lesson there, but I think I like too how they just kind of permeate so much stuff.
mm.
I've been watching on Netflix with my kids. I've been watching Delicious in Dungeon,
Okay.
and there was an element in there where like the fairy circle, it's like, oh, well, there's the fairy circle, and it's just like it all just gets like put in and shaken up, and then it all comes out.
Mm,
And like you were saying though, these specific stories that you have,
mm,
those would be just fascinating, the stuff that we wouldn't necessarily have heard before, and the consequences and like the modern adaptations of all these old stories.
mm.
That's such a, great source of inspiration. And the more you're kind of, yeah, thinking about these ideas, and as you go for your walks, they all start making a lot more sense, once you trace them down to their origins. So the more
Yeah.
you get to learn about it, and I think kids in particular, they're just so excited to hear those stories. Oh, they get all interested by it.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the ones in my area, I guess everything has just been always so mixed up. It's always just a general longing for fairy stories, and from the books and stuff I've gotten from the library.
Mm. Is the Wendigo, is that would that sort of be your region
Oh
at all, or is that not that
gosh,
area?
yeah, that's a name I've heard, but it's not as. Yeah, I can't think if that's one that's, or is that just an alternate name for trickster, or is that? Yeah, I
I
guess I
think
don't know.
I
I've
think
heard
there's
the
there,
name
there are
before.
variations of it, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I remember reading Pet Cemetery by Stephen King, and he talks about the Wendigo, and it really scared the life out of me, like at times. And like normally his books, like I love his books, but they don't normally scare me too much. But there's something about that particular folklore that really got me. And again, I've incorporated elements of that sort of stuff into what I'm writing now as well at some level. But yeah, there's something about it. I was reading about the Appalachian Mountains in North America as well, and just about the stuff that goes on there, and you read these stories of what people have experienced, and it really is it's scary stuff sometimes. But like I think that kind of stuff really does permeate fantasy in particular, because we seem to draw so much of that out, and then it gets kind of like changed and twisted a little bit into something maybe less sinister. But yeah, what do you think about all that?
Well, I think, did you read the story American Gods or the book American Gods?
No, should I read it?
It's, I think it's one, if you could listen to it, it's pretty good. Or actually, I think there was a movie version of it as well. So how do you say his
Yeah.
last name? Gaiman, Neil Gaiman or Gaiman? I
Yes.
can't.
Yeah.
And it's clever. The idea is clever because it's talk about how, America is the melting pot. So all these gods ended up here, and they do. And it's sort of like they make them as a physical manifestation. But I do like the idea of our cultures, then we become influenced by these tales we tell each other, right? And so we do have to be careful. I mean, writers, more and more, I'm thinking that, writers are wizards. We are literally creating worlds. And one of the things I've done with my girls is I read my fantasy stories to them because I kind of like, well, I've got the audience here. So I've been writing all these fantasy stories for them. But then we've been doing this for 5 years. And so now we'll just sit and recall these stories we read together. And it's like, geez, we sat in our room, the three of us, we had this collective experience. Now we've got a collective memory, which is this delightful fantasy story.
Mm,
That's no different than any other memory. That is a real living memory now. And so, it's always these stories about kindness and a lot of jokes and a lot of silliness. And it's like, but it becomes the backbone of their lives. I didn't really realize. I guess maybe if I knew the magnitude of what I was doing, I wouldn't have been so frivolous about it. But I always was writing stories for them with kindness, and I wanted them to feel loved. And I even at times when I was writing these stories, I'm like, well, if somebody who doesn't have a parent reads these stories, I want them to feel like they're loved too. And so all that's in there. And if
mm,
that does become our identities. And I think all the folklore of all the world in the United States is kind of interesting that way because yeah, we have so many little bits of it from all these different places. And it is neat to sort it out and just try to and come up with a new mythology for our new times.
mm. Love that. Do you have plans to sort of like publish those stories you've written with your kids, or no?
Yeah, no, it is. They're definitely, you should see the stack. I mean, it started out because my daughters, they're always inquisitive. So they were writing these long letters to the tooth fairy whenever they lost a tooth. So then the Tooth Fairy naturally started writing back, and then it's just like, well, what about the more adventures of the Tooth Fairy, you know? So just what is going on there? This makes no. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. So it ends up being like one thing leads to another as you're trying to explain the other things you've explained. And so now I've got a stack of 3 ring bindings. I think I've completed 7 full manuscripts, and the
Wow.
first one was only like about 100, typewritten pages long. It was like 30 chapters. The last one I think it was like a couple hundred chapters. It was so long. And
Wow.
and I'm always in the process. So my kids are great artists, and I keep thinking it'd be fun to put Substack would be a great place for these because they're kind of just fun, like, and I'm finding a lot of people are just into story time where I can sit and read a story like on a Friday.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of waiting for them to do a few more illustrations for me so I can have featured images. But yeah, at some point I would like those stories to be available to the world, if
Hmm.
for no other reason that my kids can access them later to read them to their kids.
Oh, I love it.
And
I love
the
it.
memories they'll have, it will be funny.
That's brilliant. I wonder how many parents over the years have told stories to their kids and not written them down, and then like those stories just been lost in the ether. It's great that you have written them down and you actually have them like for future and you can do stuff with them. Love that.
Oh,
Um,
do it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Walter, what would you say makes a good fantasy story? I know that's a very, very broad question, but what's at the core of the kind of fantasy story that you always kind of want to come back to that you'd read more than once, would you say?
Yeah. I think, and I thought about that recently, I think it's just the friendships. I think you start out with a person who's just sort of they've got some sort of a insurmountable obstacle and they're all depressed by it, and they go on their quest, and on their quest they meet people, and some of them they get along with good and some of them not so much, but almost without fail they find all these people have qualities that they need in order to overcome this obstacle. And bit by bit, as they go on this quest, they chip away until sometimes without even recognizing it, they find themselves victorious. And I think that's, it's the monomyth, the hero's journey.
Hmm.
I think again and again and again we have to hear that. And I mean, the kids today, they face challenges that are related to the challenges of the past, but they're different. They're taking on a different form. So we can take that same model and just provide direction, for how people can protect themselves and protect the people they care about and have strong and fulfilling relationships and stay away from the temptations that will ultimately be their undoing.
Hmm.
And I think those are the things. There's a lot of books I go back to. I mean, I go back to the Lord of the Rings all the time. And my favorite parts of that are the early parts where his friends are helping him move, and he's just like having beers with his buds, and they're just like, "Oh, we wouldn't let you down." And like all that stuff that's just sort of like day-to-day life of the Shire. Like this is what his life's like.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think just how to be a person of who's a help to your fellow human beings and who's compassionate. I think those are the essential elements.
Yeah, I think even as you're saying that, I'm just thinking of different fantasy stories I've read and how that's really permeated it. What on the flip side then makes a good villain in fantasy? This is something I've really thought long and hard about, and just in general, villains in general, what makes them good, what makes them kind of not so good. Like I've read books or watched movies before, and the villains finally appeared, and I've been like, that's just kind of okay, or whatever. Or they seem to get like beaten so easily by the hero, and you're like, oh, that's such a bit of a letdown. Like I love villains who are difficult to beat, and they're persuasive in the sense that you come to like them almost yourself, and you kind of
Yeah.
like you're almost part of you is almost like rooting for the villain as well in some ways. What would you say, even as an example of a villain you can think of in a novel or in a series that you really like? What makes that villain so good?
Yeah, you absolutely said it right at the end there, where you have to be able to understand their actions. I mean, if they're just evil for the sake of evil, it's like, well, that's boring. That's just like, I could be hit by an asteroid. That just makes no sense. But if it's feels inevitable, because you're watching this villain and they're responding to ways that they've been treated. I think like one that comes to mind, I was really disappointed by the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film, the first one. Everybody else loved it, but I didn't like it.
Mm,
And the reason is because I mean the Joker's a great villain, and I thought they had a real opportunity to suggest, oh, well, the Joker is, Bruce Wayne's older brother, and his father, who was a billionaire, just had an affair with this woman, and then they had the Joker, and then he gaslit her and got her in a mental institution, because that's what billionaires do. They use their power and influence to just hurt other people. So then there's this older brother. Then he's like, oh, now I'm going to have my real family. And it's
mm,
sort of like, Well, I would completely identify with the Joker's rage then. I mean, the Joker is actually completely justified to be angry. And, perhaps what we see in villains is they go about curing their pain in a way that only inflicts more pain upon them and they don't even realize it.
Hmm.
But I think that's the essence of a compelling villain is that yes, like you said, you have to relate to him. And I write the villains too, When I'm sitting there writing it, I'm writing the good people and the villains are the parts of me that maybe, in my 50 years of life I've learned are not the best parts of me and I feel regret about. And but you also, it's like, well, I look back at my life and the times I made mistakes, it's like there were other influences that caused that, and you have to kind of understand it, even as you denounce that behavior as wrong.
Hmm.
But those impulses are always there. I mean, we all feel jealousy and we feel, greedy sometimes and we feel anger. So all those emotions we have to work out. And a villain is a very useful character to work out those important parts of our emotion that maybe, we otherwise don't want to dwell on too much.
Yeah. Um, I think sometimes as well with villains, it's the ones that seem less villainous at the outset that can be the ones that stick with you the most. Like, think of an example in like Harry Potter, for instance. I always thought that uh Dolores Umbridge was much more effective and just scary villain than even Voldemort ended up being for me because she was more human and she just was doing things to hurt other people, as you said, and you could almost relate to it in some ways. Like you almost know people like that in your life. He
Oh,
might have been that way, whereas Voldemort was very much a sort of more over the top kind of, Hollywood style villain in the end kind of thing. Uh,
yeah. That
yeah.
slippery slope type villain. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you can get a villain that matches the hero adequately, then and you can root for them in some way and you can understand them in some way and relate to them, then they're so much more difficult to dislike and you kind of want the story to keep going because you want the villain to like endure a bit longer to see what happens to them. An example of a villain that I think is always so effective is Thanos in the Marvel movies. I don't know if you've watched them before, but
Uh-huh.
Thanos, I love the fact that he has this real conviction about what he thinks is right, and he thinks he's doing the right thing, even though he's like, annihilating half the universe. But he sees that as being for the greater good. And I always find that kind of portrayal of a villain much more effective than just I want to destroy everything and kill everybody because I'm bad, as you said. Um, but yeah, what do you think about that? What do you think about those kind of villains? Do you like that sort of thing, or?
That's absolutely great, and that's a good example. And I think it makes the resolution more difficult for the audience to understand, because
Hmm.
if it's just an evil force you have to oppose, it's sort of like, well, okay, that's easy. There's just going to be a fight. But if it's somebody who's taken otherwise good concepts and they've kind of perverted them
Hmm.
and then maybe they have some things that it's like, well, that is a problem that needs to be addressed somehow. So it's like it adds so many levels of complexity where you have to kind of go in there and like perform surgery and take out the good parts and kind of understand why the bad parts are bad. And then it requires some self-reflection on you because it makes you doubt your own convictions. Because it's like, well, if he's got these convictions about how he's right when he's doing something so evil, what about my own conviction? Because that's how you see it. It's like you start with these convictions and then you end up doing bad things based on this conviction. And so that's a really important
Hmm.
internal dialogue for the audience to have. Any
Yeah.
any villain that causes self-reflection is as yeah, he or she is doing the job required of the role.
Yeah, very much so. What about, and let's just take a slight change of direction in terms of how worlds are built in fantasy novels. So, what do you like to see, Walter, in a fantasy story in terms of world building that you can connect with and understand and enjoy, versus what you don't really connect with or like as much about certain fantasy novels?
That's a really interesting one. I think sometimes people get too hung up on the world building where if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, I got to have a city here, and it's like, well, where's the sanitation for the city going to go? I mean, and I'm guilty of doing this, where I'm just like, well, this doesn't make any sense, and it's like, look, because most of my fantasy novels, I like to just kind of set them in our world. I think that's kind of clever, where it's like all this stuff's going on like outside, and then you don't have to come up with names for anything and all that. You kind of sidestep it.
Hmm.
Or it's just like, yeah, the places you don't look, scurrying between the walls and all these other things. I think that adds a bit of realism. And I think maybe that's a big word where I always cite the example from the Matrix. There's the point in the Matrix where he says, well, maybe the computer didn't know what anything tastes like, and that's why everything tastes like chicken.
Hmm.
And when you can add those little details of these own little uh, questions and mysteries we have from life, and you insert them into your text, and you're just like, oh, so it's just adding that essence of realism. I like that you're working with like the portal fiction because that's always
Mm,
yeah, like this other place that I can get to, and that's a staple of fantasy too.
mm,
Whether it's through dreams, but it's always related in one way or another to our world. It's things we can understand. But there,
mm.
yeah, that's a big one. I think um people will stumble into their fantasy world. I think, you know, as a writer, I mean, you know, you will
Yeah.
end up in the fantasy world you need to end up in. So just start exploring it, and don't be too concerned about some of the other details because it serves a different purpose maybe, you know.
Mm.
You're not mapping it out. You're living in it.
Yes, that's a great way of thinking about it, actually. Yeah. I think it's better to just sort of drop the characters into the world and let them figure out from their perspective rather than try and map the whole thing out, as you say. Because it's overwhelming if you're a fantasy
Yeah.
writer and you're trying to think about all these details. Like you could spend all your time planning it and then not actually writing the flipping thing.
Yep.
Which really does just take up so much time. And some writers are so good at that. They can map out in intense detail, magic systems and governments and politics and just how the world works in general. And sometimes it's fascinating, but other times you're like reading these blocks of text in a novel describing like, the financial system and stuff like that. And you're like, I don't care about this. Like, where's the dragons?
Yeah.
Where's the sword fights and stuff like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like it's a little bit like Lord of the Rings, whenever Tolkien will describe like a tree for like 5 pages or something like that. And it's beautiful,
Yeah.
but at the same time you're like, move on a little bit to the action um sort of thing. You mentioned Portal fantasy there as well, Walter. What do you think is a what's like a good way of like defining what a portal fantasy is beyond just that there's portals in it? You know what I mean? Like what are the elements of portal fiction and portal fantasy that are something that always draws you in?
Yeah, I think just I mean, when I was a little kid, I always thought it'd be fun to go into the woods, and it's like, oh, maybe in the nook of this tree, I'll find a door into a different world, you know, or you know, and it's been done so many different ways, like Journey to the Center of the Earth. Oh, there's dinosaurs down here, and but just that idea of being able to escape or like through a physical, you know, magical tunnel,
Hmm,
and I think that's yeah, I guess maybe that's it comes up again and again. You think of Oz, and it is kind of fun to go through all the different stories that have come out through time and how people have found these other worlds. But in a real sense, it is just like going to another nation. You know, you go to another place, and like you were saying before, and another thing to say is that some people just love sitting there, and for them, the creative expression is just coming up with these. You know, like, oh, here's this map and here's all this. And it's like, that's great too. And you know, like Tolkien being a linguist, he came up with his languages and needed the story to make the languages seem
hmm,
more authentic. So all any kind of a creative expression is good. And I think it all just kind of represents the flow state. I mean, for me, perhaps the portal is just when I allow myself to kind of relax and put myself in that other world. And so then I'm there and
hmm,
I'll be sitting here at and if somebody comes and bothers me, it's, you know, they're dragging me out of that other world and I'm literally in those other worlds. So
hmm,
I think yeah, it's really open. I think, and it's a beautiful type of creative expression, I think, where you're just imagining another world. It could be in space, you know, it could be, and whatever mechanism you have of getting there.
hmm.
Um, those delight readers. They always have. They still delight me.
Yeah, very much. I think of Narnia as well, in particular,
Yeah.
being from Northern Ireland, where C.S. Lewis is from as well. There's a bit of a connection there, and I love all that. For you, Walter, when you're writing fantasy, which element of a fantasy novel do you enjoy writing the most? Which element do you kind of really find yourself lost in whenever you're doing it? Is it the dialogue or is it description or what?
Yeah, and this actually is really interesting because it comes from reading to my girls, which has been so useful for me for 5 years
Mm,
because it's all dialogue. They want it all in dialogue. And I always tell writers who are starting out. It's like any scene, if you can make it in dialogue, just put it in dialogue instead. Because it goes from, you know, like having somebody describe something to you to feeling like you're in the room observing a conversation. And just that adds that level of realism.
mm,
And I found, yeah, I did not, when I was writing to my kids, especially now they've grown so much, they expect so much more. So now I have to plot out things and everything. But when I first started out, it was all just jokes, you know, and fairies. They're like, oh, there's a fairy. They live in a tree, and this is what they're talking about. You know, that was enough. And they were, you know, captivated by it.
mm.
Um, but yeah, it has to be quick because the kids don't want to sit there and listen to, what they're, well, sometimes they did get it until they asked me, and that kind of helped me too. Because I'd be writing these 3-page chapters, and they're like, I get done and they'd have all these questions like, okay, now I know from the reader what I should need to put into the next chapter. So I just do it. And then they also would tell me, because in about the third or fourth book, my kids were getting older, so I'm like, I'll start talking about boys. So maybe I'll introduce a love element to this, and just to be like, it's okay, to have these kind of feelings. But I started in, and the girls are just like, nope, 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 and they got up, they like left. So that was the one time they walked out at me when I tried to do a love element. I'm like, well, okay,
It's pretty clear indication from them that
oh
they
yeah,
didn't want
they
that.
let me know. So then I had this extra character that I had nothing for him to do for the whole rest of the book. He was supposed to be the love element. I'm gonna leave him in though. It's funny.
Brilliant. I love that. Direct feedback from your readers.
Nope,
Um,
we're done. They left.
do you think, Walter, is there a benefit to writing shorter fantasy stories so that you can get almost not direct feedback, but you can get sort of faster feedback from your readers that might help you shape what the stories are like going forward?
Absolutely. That's
Mm,
without question at all. I just saw a wonderful lecture from Ray Bradbury, recorded years ago, but he's like, everybody wants to sit down and write a novel. And he's like, well, it's going to take you a year and there's no indication it's going to be good. He's like, but instead of doing that, why don't you write a short story every week?
mm,
And so at the end of a year, you'll have 52 short stories. And he's like, and I defy you to write 52 bad short stories. And he's
mm,
like, but also, he's like, you'll have that sense of accomplishment. You can get some feedback. Yes, it's absolutely critical. I think writers need to be on platforms like Substack and Medium where they're getting that interaction, just to hear what people think, what works, what doesn't.
mm.
Because otherwise it's just sort of like you're putting too much on a novel, and you're spending a whole year and you're all by yourself, and it's just, we're living, breathing creatures, we have to interact. Our stories need to live and breathe that way too. And you got to get them in front of the eyes of readers, hear what they have to say, and give yourself a chance at some victories. Like you kind of said, it's just like
Yeah,
the feedback makes us.
yeah, very much so. Even the feedback where someone gets up and leaves the room.
Yep. Well, sometimes it's like, well, okay, I'm glad you guys told me that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I love the honesty of kids. I remember reading this story once. This guy said that uh, he was reading stories to his daughter at bedtime, and he says he developed this really bad habit of just going next. Whenever she was
yeah.
like done with the story, he had to go to the next one. He said it was brutal.
Yeah, well, you got to underline it and take note and see if you can anticipate
Yeah,
when they're going to do that. And that's, boy, what better education is there about what is good writing than that? If you can
yeah.
hook a child, holy cow, you can hook anybody.
Yeah, because kids' imagination is incredible. Like I remember I did like a workshop last year with some kids in our local library, and I just got them to do some little bits and pieces of like creative writing and stuff whenever we were there. Got them to like, for instance, draw a map of a fantasy land and then like sort of just add things to it and add details and explain what it was about and stuff like that. And then I got them to like design a character and that sort of thing. And some of the stuff these kids come up with was unbelievable.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
an adult could have sat and thought about that for 6 months and not come up with something as good as what you guys did in like 6 minutes. Like it really was amazing.
Oh,
The scope of imagination they have is incredible.
yeah. And they're so willing to play those games. And it's so, and that's what I discovered when I had my kids. It was like I had two fairies in the house and all the things. It's like Christmas, and
Mm,
you're laying in bed and you hear them get up and it's like mice. And then they're like, oh, should we go downstairs? Because they're trying not to wake you up. And they go downstairs. Oh, Santa came. They're all excited. And it's just like that energy is real. That is real magic that's in the house. And if you
mm,
just go along with it, and just get as much out of it as you can.
mm.
That's the truth of magic. It's
Yeah, I,
wonderful.
I remember whenever I was a little boy, my one of my friends' mums said to us on Christmas Eve, she was like, listen out really carefully tonight because you'll probably hear Santa's sleigh during the night. And I swear, at some point during the night, I could hear like sleigh bells and stuff. I don't know if she was like out in the garden ringing them or something, but like I honestly, my imagination just created them. It made them real.
Yeah.
And it's a kid's imagination is just unbelievable. Like it really is such a powerful, powerful thing. How do you as you get older, Walter, not lose that sense of magic? How do you retain that, would you say, as an adult as you get older?
I think it's comes from being silly. I think you gotta allow yourself to be silly. And my kids were I'm always walking around singing songs, trying to get a laugh out of them, and I think too, like I try to create little moments of magic. Well, they're too old for this now, but if you count down the stoplight, you're like
Yeah,
you go like this, and it changes. And they're just like, at first they're amazed, and they're like, "Daddy," because I keep doing it. But then it just makes me laugh too, just because they get all mad at me. But there'll be times too when I'll like for example, somebody turned on the TV the other day and uh a movie started and I could tell from the soundtrack that it was a Lethal Weapon movie. I just remembered it. And so I'm just like, it's Lethal Weapon 2. And so then it's like the Lethal Weapon thing comes on, ka-chook. And then there
yeah,
was like a beat, and then it goes two. And they're like, Daddy, how did you know? And I'm like, well, it was just a guess. I had like a 20% chance of it being the right one. I didn't expect it to be. But like as far as they know, it's like I'm able to predict like every movie based on like one note, from this.
yeah,
So it's like little, and I always tell this with people too. If you're like constantly making predictions, those if you're right and it's only once in like 100 million times, that's the
yeah,
only one they'll remember. They'll forget all the other ones. They're like, oh, he's a soothsayer, he can see the future. And it's just sort of
yeah.
like, no, I just never shut up.
That reminds me of there's a joke in the show 30 Rock, where I don't know if you ever watched it, but if you watched it, yeah, Jack Donaghy's character is standing with his back to the door, and Liz Lemon Tina Fey comes into the room and says something, and he's like, before she speaks, he's like, I'm glad you got here, Lemon, or something, and then she's like, how did you know it was me? And he's like, there's like 10 people came before you. I just kept saying it till I got it right or something. It's a silly joke in the show, but it's so funny. Like it just lands so powerfully, and I love that kind of thing. Silliness. But yeah, we need more silliness in the world, I think,
Oh
for sure.
God, we do. Yeah.
Walter, just I don't want to keep you too much longer. We'll ask you a couple more
Oh,
questions
it's
about
fun. I'm having a great time.
good, good. In terms of fantasy, just to kind of go back to thinking a little bit of the world building sort of aspect. In terms of the magic of a fantasy novel, how do you nail down exactly what the rules are around fantasy whenever you're writing something or whenever you're reading something and you think, I love the way the author did that. What kind of things will like jump out at you that you really like about the rules around magic and how it works?
Yeah, that's one. I think it's you have to be careful where uh unless you're making a joke out of it, you can't just let magic solve all your problems, and there has to be some payment for it too. It has to have some consequence, otherwise it has no weight.
Hmm.
I think the guy who does a pretty good job, and we just finished reading The Name of the Wind with my kids. And my kids were a little bit lukewarm on it because he's so arrogant, the writer is. You could just kind of tell my daughter was saying, is like, gosh, every time he writes something, it's like every sentence is like, oh my God, that was like the greatest sentence ever. But his magic is really good in that, where he's got like the idea of sympathy, and you've got like things, and then you can control something, and he goes through and he explains it. And so, like, from the perspective of a wizard school, but I mean, you take like Harry Potter, and the magic is really kind of secondary. It's just sort of,
Hmm.
they'll talk about it a little bit, but they kind of keep it. Well, the Harry Potter books are essentially all mysteries anyway. So the magic is just a mystery.
Hmm.
And then it's like every time we conveniently need something, it can become this magical quest for magical understanding.
Hmm.
But it has to have some relationship to our real world too. Um,
Hmm.
it is just, and you think take something like The Lord of the Rings, where it's kind of it's a magical world, but other than that, the magic is kind of buried,
I was
and
gonna say, yeah, yeah.
yeah, where you don't see Gandalf doing a lot of things. He
Hmm.
occasionally does some stuff. He comes back from the dead and all this, but a lot of he's just really like a librarian when you come down to it. He goes to the archives a lot.
Yeah.
He's just been around a long time. So I guess it all depends. I mean, I guess it's boring if it's a video game, if you're just shooting fireballs all the time,
Hmm.
So I like magic is almost like a character. I guess you should think of it maybe that way, the character of magic within this book
Hmm.
and the rules it has. But then it's like I would kind of approach it. Other people wouldn't be the same, but I wouldn't plot it all out from the beginning. It's something we explore, like the world, we're exploring it. That's what's fun.
Hmm.
We're taking steps in this new place. And then as a writer, it's like, well, I need something new. So then you just add a new place, and then that's a new place for us to explore. So take it in bits. And then at the end of your career, people look at what he's done. And it's like, well, I was just out exploring every day. And we ended up with this.
I love that way of thinking about it. Yeah, I love that. Um, yeah, there's times whenever I'm writing fantasy and I kind of look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I like added that element in one of the previous books or whatever else, and so I could like build on it more. But then I guess that's part of the journey, as you say, like you're exploring the world you're creating at the same time as you're creating it. And you can't really map it all out from the start because in the process of exploring it yourself while you're writing it, you're gonna come up with better stuff than if you mapped it out from the start and just try to stick to it, I think. What does your process look like, Walter, in terms of are you like a plotter or a pantser whenever you write anything? Do you have it in any way plotted out at the start, or you just kind of like sort of make it up on the spot as you go?
Yeah, that's changed. And then over to, I mean, when I first started, I did plot out things a lot more. But when I started writing for my kids, because they would just demand that I would have my 3 pages for them every night, you know. And I would always just like I would have a nap in the afternoon. I'd wake up and then I'd have 40 minutes, and that's when I do my 3 pages for the girls. So then I was just cranking it out. And who was it? The guy who wrote The Grapes of Wrath. I can't think of his name. Oh, Steinbeck. I
Yeah.
think he was the one who said, "Don't edit anything until the draft is done." And I think there's a lot of I think that's really valid. Just just get it on the page and start
Mm.
writing about it. And so but now that my kids are a little older, I'm changing that again. So the last book I did sketch out. I actually wrote a page and a half that was going to be the outline, and now I wrote 20 chapters, and now I realize I need another outline because I have a general idea where we're going.
Mm.
But some of them have started out with just like maybe a paragraph or like the general idea of what the novel's going to do, but then you do get to explore it. You have to have space to kind of have fun yourself and discover new things as you're going. But what you said too, it's like going back, it's like in Star Wars, they didn't have the Imperial March, like Darth Vader's theme song. That wasn't in the first Star Wars. It's sort of like that blows my mind. It's like I'm sure there's a temptation to be like, well, wouldn't the original Star Wars have been better if we had the Imperial March? And it's like, no, it's not. It's like just that's because we found that in the second one, and that's where it belongs. So yeah, I think
Mm.
I mean, every time an idea comes to you, that's an opportunity to write it right then. You don't have to go back and do it earlier. Just do it right then because you've gone along with the journey too. So I think that's kind of important to keep in mind.
Mm. Yeah, Star Wars is an interesting example of that because obviously George Lucas did go back and retrospectively fix
Oh
things
yeah,
a lot, didn't they? But he always made it better. I think he always made it better when he did it. But
yeah,
that's
I
it's
agree.
actually kind of a mind-blowing fact that the Imperial March isn't in A New Hope. Just like you're right, like I just thinking about it there now. And how it elevated Empire Strikes Back so much, and I think that's why it's probably the best Star Wars movie,
Yeah,
in
maybe just
general.
that song yeah, just
Yeah.
the Imperial March. You're like, holy crap, they're serious now, and that's really what we needed to get from this because the first one is a story about Luke. If you
Mm.
had the Imperial March and the story about Luke, then you dominate Luke. So it's like we needed it. It's like now we want to know who's this Darth Vader guy. Well, you're gonna find out. He
Yeah.
sounds like this every time he enters a room. Oh,
I love it. I think we could have a full-on conversation about Star Wars at some point, I think,
oh
in the future
yeah,
as
that'd
well,
be fun.
easily. Love Star Wars. Um, Walter, just sort of come towards the end here. Can you give our listeners and our watchers a bit of advice for anyone who maybe has a fantasy story, maybe bouncing around in the back of their mind, and they want to just start it, but they're not exactly sure how they should go about doing it? How would you advise them to sort of to go about doing that?
Yeah, it really does come down to, I mean, there's that scene you want to write always, I think. And a lot of times you think to yourself, well, this is what I want to write, but it's at the end of the book. So I've got to write all this other stuff first to kind of set it up. No, no. It's like you have this idea in your head. It's like there's this big battle and this happens. And so just start there. And then
Mm,
it's be like, because now in your, and this is, it mirrors your own creative journey. I mean, let yourself be part of the creative journey. This has to be fun. And if you're not having fun in the moments when you're sitting down and writing, because you're pushing off the things you really want to write about because you feel an obligation, that
mm,
obligation will come through in the text. And it's
yeah.
okay. I mean, you don't have to do a timeline that makes any kind of sense. You can jump all around the way our brains work. It's the way dreams work, right? We don't know what the hell's going on. It's like it keeps us entertained
Yeah.
because we don't know what's going on or what's going to happen. And it's only at the end where you should have clarity anyway. Oh, I lost my screen there. It's back. So I would just say, yeah, just start putting the words on the page. Just start exploring that world, see how it feels, and you know, you learn as you go. Because a lot of people sit there too, and they think, well, what's the perfect starting sentence for a book? Is the best of times, is the worst of times? All these things. Call me Ishmael. It's like you're not going to know that until the whole book is done. The first word is the last word that you put into your final draft. So
Mm,
just don't even worry about that. Get started, get it written, and then in the editing process later, you can change things. but just start it, just write it, and just give yourself that joy of creation. And yeah,
Mm.
don't stress. It should be fun.
Yes, it should definitely be fun. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, that's brilliant advice because there are times when I'm writing a novel and I do kind of get to a point and I'm like, I feel kind of stuck. And I know we just have to kind of like push through a chapter to get to the part I really want to write. But as you say, that will convey to the reader and they'll feel that when they read it that you're pushing through and just trying to almost like fill in the space or get your characters from A to B so then get to the fun part. Yeah, I might try that actually
Yeah.
next time I come to that kind of point and I feel a bit stuck. I might just write the scene I want to write
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
just go back and write the bit in between later. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be great. It'll be interesting to hear how that works, you know.
Mm.
And I always say too, it's like some things don't work for people, some things do, and everybody. But I think that's really fun, and it's like every time I feel my where I start giggling, I know my kids are going to react, even if they get up and walk, which is actually still a really good reaction. I mean, if
Yeah.
you can provoke a reaction to make people get up and walk away, it's like okay, that's powerful writing. Then I got to give myself some props, so it did something.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there's something about writing a scene that you've had in your mind for a really long time, and you finally get it on the page, and then the part whenever a reader reads it for the first time, like I always let my wife read my books first, obviously, and I know whenever she's getting to a scene that I love, whether it's like a horror scene or like a really nice fantasy scene, and I'm always kind of watching her out of the corner of my eye to see what her reaction is going to be whenever she gets to it, and there's nothing more gratifying than seeing someone either be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that was great," or be like horrified and frightened
Yeah.
by it because you know it's really scary. Yeah, I love it. Walter, I just want to circle back one more time, right to the end where we kind of started today. And obviously, this podcast is really about writing for a living and and trying to generate some money through what we do, so we can do more of the fun stuff like writing fantasy and just having those silly story moments and stuff like that. What's one piece of advice you would leave our audience with today who want to write for a living, want to generate some money so they can do the fun stuff like write fiction?
Absolutely. And this is a really great topic because I've been talking about with my daughter all the time.
Mm,
And I always say it's like don't give up on your dreams, but you just have to have some other kind of, especially when you're starting out, have some sort of stability. I mean, my wife, in the United States, healthcare is our issue, and I'm fortunate enough where my wife we get healthcare through her business. And
mm,
I've done all kinds of things in my life where I've been a teacher, and so I've been telling my daughter because she's fluent in Spanish, it's like I'm like, just get that teaching certificate. She's like, well, I don't want to get it. I don't want to necessarily teach. I'm like, yeah, but you can get a half-time teaching job, and it's super easy for you because you're already fluent at it. And going back to somebody like Harrison Ford, he said it perfectly. He's like, he noticed when he went to Hollywood, all of his other acting buddies, they ran out of money and they had to quit. He's
mm,
like, well, I'll just pick up a side hustle as a carpenter then, and I'll make some money as I'm doing this. And I think maybe a lot of writers they feel like shame. I think there's social pressure, where that imposter syndrome thing, where people are like, "Well, if you can't support yourself, then you're not good at it." It's like there is no writer I've ever heard of who didn't have to take other jobs as they went along, and you're just because I was telling my daughter she wants to illustrate comic books and things, and it's like, yeah, but you're going to spend a year on that, even if it sells really well. How much are you going to make? $10,000? I mean, that'd be a really good book.
mm,
So I like taking these other jobs that are writing adjacent. I worked as a transcriber for a while. That really speeded up my typing speed, and it was really good.
mm,
Helped me get the grammar and everything. So I had clean copy the first time. I did content writing. So just all these things, and you just have to also be very, very financially aware. I think we're tempted to think, like, well, I'll just write a great book, and then a movie studio will buy it, and then they'll make a theme park of that book in Florida, and I'll do
yeah.
fine. It's like, yeah, well, that happened. That statistical likelihood of that is zero. I mean, maybe it happened to one person, but divide that by the population of all humanity, it's zero. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen. So just give yourself the opportunity to succeed. You got to take care of yourself. And if you don't learn the financial side of things, people are going to take advantage of you too. I mean, things like graphic design, you're going to have to learn graphic design as a writer. You have to learn all these arty things. So just make your money in ways that are related to your creative expression, and then just keep doing more and more writing. And finally, when I was about 45, all my income came from writing. So I'm going to
Mm,
keep doing that. Other people, maybe they do it when they're 25. More power to them if that happens that way. If it
mm,
takes people till they're 100, just keep doing it. And I think if you keep at writing, you will have success with writing. If you keep at the craft, you keep getting better at it. And yeah, just don't let those external pressures take that away from you, I guess is maybe the big thing. If that's what you want to do, you have to do it. Find a way to do it.
Mm.
And we'll support you because that's supporting each other is what writers should do.
I love it. What a great way to end this conversation. So good, Walter. And you're a shining example of that as well. Like
Oh, thank you,
the
sir. You
what
too.
yeah, no, what you do is fantastic and you've worked really hard to get to that point. And I think you're a real inspiration for anybody who wants to do that as well. So more power to you as well.
Oh, thank you so
Um
much. That's so nice.
where can people find you, Walter? Is Substack the best place to follow you, would you say? Or
Yep, I
yeah.
would say that's I'd rather be writing. None of my work is behind a paywall there. It's all open to the public. I write for tips, I like to say, and it's just sort of like follow the motto of the library, the public library, which has saved, many a sad person, including
Mm.
myself. So let's keep it rolling that way.
Love it. Brilliant. Walter, thanks so much. Again, anyone who's listening, make sure you go and subscribe to Walter's publication and check him out in Medium. Read his stuff, tell him how great it is, give him some tips in his coffee
Yes.
jars as well.
Get up and walk
Um,
away, even if you have to.
yeah. Take a leaf from his kid's book as well. But no, Walter, thanks so much. Really, really cool to finally have this really good conversation. And as I said, I'm pretty sure we could talk about a lot of other topics very easily, like Star Wars, for instance, in
Oh, let's
future.
do it sometime. I need these breaks. This is rejuvenating. Great
Yeah.
way to start the week.
I love it. I love it. Walter, thanks so much. I'll catch you again at Substack real soon.
Yep. See you. Thank you.
Thank you.